Right, guys, welcome back, and let's get started with the second session. I am Priya, and I'm going to chair this session. So the first paper is crafting communality and computing, building on existing strengths to support a vulnerable population. The speaker is Aakash Gautam, and a little bit about the speaker today. Aakash is a computer science PhD candidate at Virginia Tech. His research focuses on issues of power, authority, and inequity. His work has examined ways to support middle school students in low resource schools, and he will talk today in examining community-based participatory approaches to support organizations in Nepal. So let's welcome Aakash. Over to you, Aakash.
All right, thank you, Priya. Can you see the slides and can you all hear me? All right, thank you. So thank you all for joining me here, and thank you, Priya, Matthew, and team for having me in this event. Today, I'd like to talk about our ongoing work in Nepal. As Priya mentioned, I'm interested in issues of power and authority, particularly in working with underserved communities. The high-level vision I have for my work is to contribute to our collective understanding of what is the right thing to do and how do we know we've done it, especially when working with vulnerable populations where there are several competing tensions and constraints. Now, to move towards that vision, in this work here, I'll narrow onto a particular aspect, that of illuminating a way to work with a vulnerable community in a way that is both respectful and practical. Now, the particular context that I will be talking today is on our ongoing work with an anti-trafficking organization in Nepal and the trafficking survivors supported by the organization. Nepal is a major source of human trafficking. It is estimated that anywhere between 6,000 to 12,000 girls and women are trafficked annually. In fact, the open border with India in the south is one of the busiest sites of human trafficking in the world. Now, in this talk, I'll discuss our attempt on taking an asset-based approach to introduce technology to a group of trafficking survivors. I'll be referring to the survivors with whom we worked with as sister survivors in this talk. First, I'll discuss our prior work where we identified two elements of the sister survivors' strengths, namely their crafting skills in making local handicrafts and the mutual bond they had for each other. Following that, I'll discuss a design and introduction of a web application called Hamrokala that attempted to build on those identified strengths. And finally, I'll discuss some of the implications of the work that we believe would be beneficial to members of the SHCI community like you. In particular, we argue for a long-term commitment to community building while taking an asset-based approach and present three design principles that we believe could be beneficial in promoting communal use of technology. To begin with, the trafficking survivors that we work with in Nepal are vulnerable due to a myriad of reasons. Most of them are young and have limited formal education. Many are shunned by their families and they have very limited source of social support. Anti-trafficking NGOs are major actors who've been supporting the survivors in the reintegration process. And so we find the survivors being heavily dependent on these NGOs. Now, the NGOs on their part provide survivors with protected living home, some sort of skill-based training, which is mostly local handicrafts, and support during reintegration process, throughout the reintegration process. In our work, we've been working with one such NGO in Nepal. Now, in that work, we take an asset-based approach where we focus on the sister survivors' existing strengths. Asset-based approaches stand in contrast with a need-based, deficit-focused approach, which is quite common in international development. In fact, it is argued that focusing exclusively on needs and deficits perpetuate dependency in the community and rob agency from actors who can actually bring about change. The anti-trafficking NGOs, including those in Nepal, have been called to be part of the rescue industry for having perpetuated need for such a long time. In contrast, asset-based approaches focus on the strengths possessed by the community members. As Ellison, Matthew, and others argue, asset-based approaches encourage power within, power to, and power with the community, and resists having power over the community. Interest in asset-based approaches have been growing in HCI communities, such as in Cho et al.'s work with low-resource Latino families in Southern California, and Karusala and Viswanath et al.'s work in low-resource learning environment in Mumbai, India. Now, the key here is to identify strengths possessed by the community and seek ways to build upon it. In our work to do that, we build on our earlier ethnographic study where we had uncovered two elements of strength possessed by the sister survivors. Again, similar to what Samantha had done, we used photo elicitation to do so. The first strength that we identified was the sister survivors' crafting skills. The NGO provided training to all sister survivors to work on local handicrafts as part of the reintegration process. The crafting skills have potential to generate income. However, the sister survivors and the staff members were aware that there wasn't quite a lot of sale happening in the local market. Despite that, there is an opportunity to build on the knowledge of crafting towards what we believe are skills that can be more enduring in the long run. Similarly, during the study, we noticed a strong bond between the sister survivors. The shared living situation, the awareness of the past, the shared work and mutual support that they had provided each other had fostered a strong bond between them. Again, the sister survivors noted that they may lose the connection they have after leaving the shelter home because they have to move across the country. Technology could help support the sister survivors in towards more enduring strengths, and that could hold value after they leave the shelter home. However, here there are constraints like limited digital and text literacy. None of the sister survivors who participated in the study had access to computers or mobile phones. None of them were attending schools, and only 3 reported being comfortable enough to read a simple SMS text. Earlier, the NGO had tried introducing computers and Photoshop to the sister survivors. The sister survivors had found the experience overwhelming, as we can hear in S3's statement here, who said that she had never touched a laptop before to know what to do with it. But despite that poor experience, both the sister survivors and the NGO staff members expressed an interest to reintroduce computers. And aligned with that interest, we believe that computers are flexible enough that it can be designed first to provide a gentler introduction to computing, and second, to open up possibilities through which we can build upon the existing strengths towards more enduring ones. And that's what we did in our work in this CHI paper. Aiming to introduce the sister survivors to computing, we developed a voice-annotated web application called Hamrokala, which translates to our craft in Nepali. The web application was contextualized around crafting, allowing the sister survivors to draw sketches, post details of the crafts for sale, look at other people's craft, and post audio comments. We hypothesized that contextualizing the web application around crafting would help in introducing computing. It is worth noting here that the web application was hosted in a local network and not connected to the internet. We did this because we had not provided any lessons or mechanisms for online safety earlier. All the elements of Hamrokala had naturalistic voice annotation that played in a female voice whenever a user hovered over the elements. This was done to remove the need to read text while using the application. Moreover, the sister survivors have limited digital literacy. So phrases common in digital parlance, such as login or logout, which is also commonly used in Nepali websites, hold little meaning to them. Instead of that, we used elaborated phrases in the voice annotation. For example, instead of saying logout in Nepali, the web application said, "To leave this technology, press here." In this way, we see the voice annotation not as an information source, but rather as a conversation with the users. To build upon the sister survivors' mutual bond with one another, we added features that promoted social interaction. For example, in addition to posting crafts for sale, the sister survivors could share the crafts with their community and send or receive audio comments on it. Similarly, drawings could be shared, copied, modified, and reshared with the community. Technology alone is not enough though. The way it is introduced and how it is positioned is critical and requires careful consideration. We conducted a 10-day workshop for a group of 9 sister survivors between the ages of 13 and 20. This was back when we all could be in the same room. Each session ran for around 2 hours, and we had 4 laptops which were shared in groups of 2s and 3s. Note that the sound of the voice annotation that played in the laptop could be heard by others in the room. On the final day, each sister survivor explained Hamrokala to a staff member. This was done both to see how much the sister survivors had understood the web application, and more critically, to promote a sense of ownership over the web system. Overall, we see, the sister survivors could use Hamrokala, and we saw a large volume of digital artifacts being created. The sister survivors seem to appear to like using Hamrokala, where they stayed beyond the 2 hours. And the staff members at the end expressed astonishment at with what the sister survivors were able to do. Again, being able to explain a web application is not a lot, but that astonishment reflects the fact of how low the bar had been set because of the prior experience, which had not gone well. Again, that leads me to reiterate the value of careful consideration when introducing technology and its potential to the community, especially for people who have very limited digital fluency. In terms of the use of voice annotation, the sister survivors initially relied on the voice annotation to navigate around the web application. However, the use receded once they became familiar with the layout. They refer to the voice annotation at times, but just to remember what to do, and rarely played the audio completely. During the sessions, we noticed that the sister survivors were helping one another to use computers. The kind of support they provided was similar to the support they provided each other when working on their crafts. Some explicitly asked for help, whereas others moved around the table helping each other without being asked for. This seemed to help facilitate computer use and make it a fun activity, as we can hear here in S2's comment, who said, with the sisters helping, computing was a fun, easy thing. Now, while showing it to the warden, I got scared and my hands shivered. Note that the mutual support helped in reducing fear around technology, but as we heard in S2's account here, the fear was not completely overcome. Beyond mutual support, they seem to be enthralled in being able to share their work with one another. Did it come was a commonly used phrase throughout the sessions to check that their work was seen by others. S9's joy that we can see here was shared by other sister survivors as well. Of course, there are elements of novelty effect at play here, but the growing interest to learn computing and own their work suggests that there is more to it than novelty effect. Another thing that suggests it being more than novelty effect is the fact that the sister survivors were actively negotiating what could be done in the space. For example, they set a rule that nobody could like everything about the technology and that one has to be critical about it. We don't want to romanticize individual boundaries or collective practices though. The sister survivors expressed the need for individual boundaries too. This was most evident in their respect for other people's drawing, where they declined to modify those drawings. This was done not because they feared damaging the original art, but rather because they felt they would not be able to justify the original artist's intent, as we can hear S9's clarification here. The context of crafting helped the sister survivors to understand Hamrokala's function. They attached value such as using it to sell their crafts and using it to inform others of their crafts. Moreover, because the web application was contextualized around crafting, it drew discussions on their crafting process, effort, and value. The most prominent element that stood out was their feeling of having limited control over their crafts. This could be seen in the fact that none of their audio comments critiqued the crafts, whereas all of the comments suggested ways to improve the video presentation. Now I'd like to draw out some aspects of our work that we think could inform future work with vulnerable population. The most immediate implication is that we believe the following three interdependent aspects of our work can help promote communality and technological adaptation, especially for people with low digital literacy. First, the voice annotation publicized what one was doing to the group. This made the activity perceptible and worked as an invitation for others to join in and help. The sister survivors' pre-existing mutual bond was beneficial in it. That, coupled with the social interaction promoted by the technology, seemed to make the activity fun and engaging. Second, not everyone will observe information equally, and they may feel overwhelmed. One way that worked for us was that because the sister survivors worked in groups and some members of the group understood enough of the facet of the work, they more critically, they had enough time to discuss and draw the knowledge together towards meaningful action. Creating those appropriable steps in the activity seemed to help in use and was in stark contrast with their earlier experience with computers, where they had reported being overwhelmed. Third, we argue that there is a need to build in fun choices in socio-technical systems, even when a focus on economic well-being might indicate a more restrictive approach. The web application in this case was not only about posting items for sale. One broad rule of thumb that we could think of is of designing technology for the population in a way that we ourselves would enjoy using it. Second, technology can be a valuable tool if designed carefully. In our case, we believe that technology provided a safe space for experimentation, one that encouraged negotiation and supported in expressing and strengthening the sister survivors' bonds within a new context afforded by the technology. It also allowed us to move away from crafting towards what we believe can be a more enduring strength. Finally, we strongly argue for an asset-based approach. Focusing on the strengths that the community possesses can help empower the individuals within the structure. In doing so, we reiterate Sultana et al.'s argument for empowering vulnerable communities within the existing structure rather than trying to dismantle the structure altogether. It is particularly relevant considering that our capabilities are limited to protect an already vulnerable group from harm in case our drastic approach fails. Having said that, focusing on assets alone may not solve the larger systemic issues that have resulted in the population's vulnerability in the first place. There is a need for long-term committed engagement with smaller but frequent and careful steps that simultaneously address the larger system issues. For example, as we heard, the sister survivors felt that they had limited control over their crafting practices. In the follow-up study, we discussed the issue with the trainers who promised and had started providing more control to the sister survivors. It is a small step, but it allows us to slowly push back on the systemic issues and thereby support broader possibilities to build around the sister survivors' existing strengths. Yet there is much more to examine in proceeding in respectful and practical ways. And with that, I will conclude my talk. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to take in questions.
Thank you, Aakash. So please post your questions in the chat box, and we can go ahead with the Q&A.